I started with some initial reading because I knew absolutely nothing about women in uniform in World War I. And once I'd done the initial reading, I realised that there were quite a lot of different groups that actually worked in uniform, and you could take a broad spectrum. So in the end I decided to focus on women in the armed forces because very few people, including myself, realised that women in the armed forces were actually enrolling in World War I. Initially I did some background reading, lots of internet searching, lots of contacting museums such as the Royal Navy Museum at Portsmouth, the Army Museum and the RAF museums. The National Archives at Kew were very helpful for the Army side, so that gave me a really good start. And then I was put in touch with David Turner from Narborough, and he had done a lot of research on Narborough Aerodrome. And as a result of that, he had a little bit of information about the women, but we were then able to find out a lot more. And he was able to give us some fantastic resources too. I think the one that resonates most with me are the Easter sisters from Narborough. There were two sisters, Stella and Irene Easter. And I think when you think of the war and parents whose children go off to war, they're thinking about, certainly in World War I, potentially losing their sons or their brothers or their fiancés. But the Easter girls worked at Narborough and they worked in the doping sheds. And I didn't know a great deal about the doping process, but it was quite a toxic chemical that they used to paint onto the aircraft fabric to tighten the fabric and make it fly better. And they left Narborough in 1919, but then they died a couple of years later. We think it's been suggested as a result of working with the chemicals on the doping. And Stella, one of the sisters who died, she also kept an autograph book, which we also are very fortunate to have at the moment. And the autograph book is full of lovely stories and poems and anecdotes about life on the base. Fortunately, David Turner from Narborough, he was able to talk to a lot of the women who worked at Narborough before most of them died in the 1990s, 2000. So he actually had a lot of first-hand evidence, which was fantastic. And also challenging the view that maybe if they went into the forces, they were only going as cooks or cleaners. They were actually working as engineers, as fitters, doing lots of technical things as well. Another story was of the cousins Trixie and Peggy. They worked as telephonists at Narborough, and apparently Narborough didn't have any telephone systems. The only telephone they could ring was one in King's Lynn. And they used to have dances at Narborough on a Friday night, and both girls were too frightened to go home in the dark, so they used to stay with friends at Narborough Common. And it's those sorts of stories that bring it all to life, really. When you look at First World War stories, Second World War stories, we hear an awful lot about the trenches and the various battles. And I think sometimes it's the little stories that make the difference. And especially for this exhibition, it's been about the women. For example, I was doing a little bit of work on Pullum, which started out as a naval air station and then became an RAF station. And Pullum station was famous for its airships. It was known as the Pullum Piggery because of the airships that they flew there. And the Heritage Centre here has the only edition that I have found of the magazine that they brought out called the Pullum Patrol. It's a lovely magazine and I wish we could find more. So I got very excited. I thought I will read the magazine and I'll find out a little bit about the women. It's all about the men and the dog mascot, but none of the women. And it's their untold story. And I think it's really important that we find that out.